Human history is filled with countless rituals developed by different cultures and civilizations. Although these rituals were designed to meet religious beliefs, social order, or spiritual needs, some of them resulted in terrifyingly dangerous and deadly outcomes. The deadliest rituals in history reveal both the creative and the dark sides of humanity. In this video, we will examine 5 rituals from different periods and parts of the world that led to high death tolls, and explore the cultural, religious, and social dynamics behind these practices. Each of these rituals left its mark on history, with horrifying consequences that cost human lives. Don't forget to like the video to support the channel. First, human sacrifice among the Aztecs. One of the most powerful civilizations of Mesoamerica, the Aztecs were known for their complex religious system. According to Aztec belief, the gods needed human blood to keep the world alive. The sun god Huitzilopochtli and the rain god Tlaloc were nourished with bloody sacrifices. The Aztecs believed that human sacrifice was necessary to maintain the order of the universe and to prevent disasters. These rituals had both religious and political purposes because sacrifice ceremonies united the society and struck fear into their enemies. Aztec human sacrifice rituals were usually performed in sacred places, such as the Great Temple of Tenochtitlan. Victims were chosen among war captives, slaves, or volunteers. The most common method was to lay the victim on a stone altar at the top of the temple, cut open the chest with an obsidian knife, and remove the heart while it was still beating. The heart was raised to the sky to be offered to the gods, while the body was rolled down the temple steps. In some cases, the skin of the victim was flayed and worn by priests as part of the ritual. For example, in ceremonies dedicated to the god Zip-Totec, this skinning practice was common. It is reported that during the rededication of the Great Temple in 1487, tens of thousands of people were sacrificed over 4 days. Though these numbers are debated, the scale of Aztec sacrifice rituals is considered one of the bloodiest practices in history. Thousands of people lost their lives in these ceremonies each year. Although most of the victims were enemy soldiers captured in wars, volunteers from Aztec society or even children were also included in these rituals. The rituals were both physically and psychologically terrifying. Most victims were tortured before the ceremony or forced to wait in fear. Moreover, these practices reinforced the militaristic nature of Aztec society, leading to constant wars and more captives, which indirectly increased death rates. Although Aztec rituals appear barbaric from a modern perspective, they were deeply tied to the religious and cosmological worldview of their time. The Aztecs believed that the universe worked in a cyclical order and that the gods fed on human blood. These rituals were tools to unite society and reinforce religious authority. However, with the Spanish conquest of the Aztec lands of the 16th century, these practices were banned and the Aztec civilization collapsed. Still, the legacy of these rituals lives on through archaeological findings and Spanish chronicles. Second, the sati tradition in India. Sati was a ritual practiced in India, especially among Hindu societies, until the 19th century. In this tradition, a widow would burn herself alive on her husband's funeral pyre. The ritual was inspired by the Hindu goddess Sati, who threw herself into the fire and preserved her husband's honor. The act symbolized the woman's union with her husband's soul and her devotion. However, this practice was often not voluntary but imposed by social pressure and family expectations. In the Sati ritual, the widow was placed on the funeral pyre of her husband, and the fire was lit. In some cases, women were forced or tied to the pyre. The ritual usually took place in public and carried a religious, ceremonial atmosphere. Women who refused to participate faced social exclusion, family disgrace, or fear of divine punishment. Some sources mention that women were sedated with drugs or physically forced into the fire. Sati caused the deaths of thousands of women. In the 18th to 19th centuries, particularly in northern India, this practice reflected a society that disregarded women's lives. Since women were often married young, they would be pressured into sati if widowed at an early age. The British colonial administration outlawed sati in 1829, yet it continued secretly. The ritual's deadly nature destroyed women both physically and psychologically. Sati reflected the patriarchal structure of Hindu society and the restricted roles of women. It was a tradition that equated loyalty with death and stripped women of their personal freedoms. with British laws and modern reform movements, sati largely disappeared. Although rare cases were still reported in the 20th century, it stands as a shocking example of the intersection of gender inequality and religious tradition. Third, the seppuku ritual in Japan. Seppuku was ritual suicide in Japan's samurai culture, symbolizing honor and loyalty. Samurai performed seppuku when they lost their honor, failed their lords, or wanted to avoid punishment. The ritual was tied to the Bushido code and demonstrated the samurai's courage, discipline, and devotion. Seppuku had both individual and social meaning because the samurai's honorable death protected the reputation of his family and his lord. Seppuku was usually carried out in a formal ceremony. The samurai would wear a white kimono and kneel on a tatami mat. Then, using a short sword, he would cut across his abdomen. This was an extremely painful process, and it was often completed by a helper who decapitated the samurai to end his suffering. The ritual was often performed in front of an audience, showcasing the samurai's bravery. For female samurai, a similar ritual called jigai existed, which usually involved cutting the throat. Seppuku led to the deaths of thousands of samurai throughout history. It was particularly common during the Edo period and became an inseparable part of the samurai class. Seppuku was not only an individual act, but also a mechanism that regulated society. However, it was both physically excruciating and psychologically devastating. Although banned in modern Japan, some people even in the 20th century, such as a writer Yukio Mishima, performed a ritual for honor. Seppuku reflects a feudal social structure in Japan and the samurai understanding of honor. It demonstrates the obligation of individuals to prove their loyalty to society and their lords through death. While its physical practice has disappeared in modern Japan, its symbolism remains. It stands as one of history's deadliest traditions, where human life was sacrificed for honor and loyalty. Fourth, the blood eagle of the Vikings. In Viking culture, the so-called blood eagle ritual, allegedly performed on enemies, is considered one of the most brutal and debated rituals in history. The ritual appears in Viking sagas, especially the Orkney saga and other Scandinavian legends. The blood eagle was carried out as a punishment and an offering to the gods. Its purpose was to instill fear in enemies while serving as a sacrificial act. In the ritual, the victim was laid face down, the back was cut open, and the ribs were separated. Then, the lungs were pulled out and arranged to resemble the wings of an eagle. This process caused the victim to die in extreme pain. Although saga accounts describe the ritual vividly, some historians argue it may be an exaggeration or myth. Still, archaeological evidence suggests that the Vikings did employ brutal methods in their sacrificial practices. If it truly existed, the blood eagle was an exceptionally painful and deadly ritual. Victims would die quickly from shock, blood loss, or organ failure. The psychological effect was also significant. It spread fear among enemies and reinforced Viking dominance in battle. However, evidence of its widespread use is limited, leaving the blood eagle shrouded in both horror and mystery. The blood eagle reflects the warrior and religious culture of the Vikings. They valued sacrifices to their gods and the intimidation of their enemies. While modern historians debate its authenticity, the blood eagle remains a terrifying legend that has shaped the brutal image of the Vikings. Fifth, the Jonestown mass suicide. One of the most tragic events of the 20th century, the Jonestown mass suicide was the deadly ritual of a modern cult. In 1978, in Jonestown, Guyana, the People's Temple cult led by Jim Jones forced more than 900 followers to drink cyanide-laced beverages, leading to mass death. The event illustrates the destructive consequences of religious fanaticism and charismatic leadership. Jones convinces followers that this act, which he called revolutionary suicide, was a protest against the capitalist world. In Jonestown, Jim Jones ordered his followers to drink fruit juice mixed with cyanide. Most of the community, including children, drank it. Although planned as a collective suicide, many were forced to drink or complied out of fear. Jones framed the act as defiance against threats from the outside world. The event resulted in the deaths of 918 people, making it one of the largest mass suicides in modern history. The Jonestown tragedy was not only a physical disaster, but also a psychological one. Members of the cult were manipulated into participating due to Jones's charisma and psychological control. The deaths of children highlighted the atrocity of the event. Jonestown revealed the lethal potential of modern cults. Jonestown stands as a dark example of 20th century religious cult movements. Jim Jones initially attracted followers with promises of social justice and equality, but gradually turned into an authoritarian leader. The event demonstrated the dangers of charismatic leaders and isolated communities. Its legacy continues to influence studies on cult psychology and mass manipulation. The 5 deadliest rituals in history provide an important lens for understanding humanity's religious, cultural, and social dynamics. The Aztec human sacrifices, the Sooty tradition, Seppuku, the Blood Eagle, and the Jonestown mass suicide all arose in different times and places, but shared a common theme: disregard for human life. These rituals were born from fear of gods, desires to maintain social order, or notions of honor and loyalty. Today, although such deadly rituals have largely disappeared, these stories in the past remind us of human complexity and the power of cultural practices. The memory of these deadly rituals serves as a warning for humanity to strive toward a more peaceful and ethical future. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to support the channel.